Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. In the gleaming corridors of the Galactic Empire, the day of the elections arrived like a grand festival. Towering holoscreens broadcast the event to every corner of the empire, showcasing the citizens' enthusiasm and the supposed exercise of democracy in action. On the surface, it was a display of unity and progress, a symbolic ritual to demonstrate the power of the people. But beneath the sheen of this spectacle, power remained firmly in the hands of the military and corporate elites. They had long since perfected the art of engineering these elections, controlling the results with precision while giving the masses the illusion of choice. And yet, on this particular election day, something went wrong. Jared Darlin, a man of simple origins, never expected to find himself in the middle of such turmoil. He had entered the race as a reformist, a grassroots candidate with a small but passionate following. His campaign platform was radical, at least by the empire's standards. He called for wealth redistribution, breaking the stranglehold of the military-industrial complex, and opening up classified corporate contracts for public scrutiny. No one in power had ever taken him seriously. He was meant to be the token opposition of the figurehead to placate those who still believed in the democratic process. But when the final results came in, something unimaginable happened. Jared won. His victory was an accident, the result of an error in the complex algorithm the elites used to manipulate the votes. In their arrogance, the system they relied on had failed them, handing power to someone who wasn't meant to win. At first, there was stunned silence across the capital. In the grand hall where the results were being tallied, the elites sat in their luxurious seats, eyes widening in disbelief as the announcement echoed through the chamber. Jared's face, beamed across the empire, looked equally stunned. He had never expected to win, and the realization of what this meant hit him like a tidal wave. The upper echelons of power, led by the shadowy coalition of corporate executives and high-ranking military officials, immediately convened a secret meeting. The glittering towers of Galactic Prime, the capital planet, shone in the night as they gathered in a secure location far from the public eye. General Vorta, the head of the Galactic Armed Forces, was the first to speak. His voice was a gravelly rumble, betraying the years of military campaigns he had overseen. This cannot stand. We cannot allow some idealist to dismantle everything we've built. If he gets control of the council, he'll expose everything. Beside him, Corwin Stratton, the CEO of the empire's largest corporate conglomerate, nodded. His slick hair and expensive suit radiated an aura of arrogance, but beneath it lay a man who had built his empire by being ruthless. The people love him now, but that can change. We control the media. We've manipulated public perception before. We can do it again. But the problem, General Vorta cut in, is that he's not like the others. He's not corruptible. We've looked into him. He actually believes in his nonsense. He's not in it for wealth or power. Stratton leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Then we'll have to handle this the hard way. Meanwhile, Jared's first days in office were a whirlwind. He moved quickly, aware that his time was likely limited. His election was nothing short of a miracle, but he knew better than to believe in fairy tales. The forces arrayed against him were vast and powerful, and he could feel their eyes watching his every move. His first act was to fulfill a campaign promising transparency. He declassified records showing the government's close financial ties to the military and corporate giants. What had once been whispers on the fringes of the empire now became undeniable facts. The people, who had long felt oppressed by the system, were electrified. Protests erupted across major planets, calling for further reforms and an end to corporate control. Jared visited these planets personally, refusing the protection of a heavy security detail. He wanted to show the people that he wasn't just another puppet leader. Wherever he went, he was greeted by crowds chanting his name, their faces filled with hope. To them, he was the first real leader in generations. "I've spent my life on the outer colonies," Jared said during a broadcast to the entire empire, "where people are forgotten, and resources are siphoned off to fuel the luxury of the few. That ends today. Together, we will take back control of this empire. It belongs to all of us, not just a select few. The message resonated deeply with the working class citizens, those who had long been disenfranchised by the elites. For the first time in decades, they felt as though they had a voice. But in the pristine halls of Galactica Prime, the message was a declaration of war. General Vorta and Corwin Stratton wasted no time. They set their plan in motion, calling upon their vast resources to undermine Jared's authority. The media, once neutral or even supportive, began to change its tone. Stories of Jared's supposed radicalism flooded the empire. They painted him as a dangerous extremist, someone whose reckless policies would destroy the stability of the empire. His political opponents were bribed or blackmailed into turning against him. Even within his own administration, spies planted by the elites began to sabotage his efforts, creating internal conflict and inefficiencies. Still, Jared pressed on. He refused to be cowed by the opposition, but he could feel the weight of the empire's establishment bearing down on him. At night, in the solitude of his quarters, he would wonder if it had all been a mistake, yet if perhaps the empire was too far gone to save. One evening, after a long day of meetings and political maneuvering, Jared was walking through one of the quieter districts of the capital. He had chosen not to bring his security detail, wanting some time alone to think. The air was crisp, and the sky above was clear, filled with stars that stretched out endlessly into the void. It was peaceful until the explosion. A blast ripped through the street behind him, sending shock waves through the air. Jared was thrown to the ground, debris raining down around him. He lay there for a moment, dazed, as his ears rang from the impact. When he tried to stand, his vision blurred. But as the dust settled, he saw the unmistakable shapes of military vehicles pulling up, soldiers spilling out of them like ants. They weren't here to rescue him. Jared ducked into a nearby alley, his mind racing. This wasn't just an attack, it was an assassination attempt. He had known it would come eventually, but he hadn't expected it so soon. His only thought now was survival. As he weaved through the maze of streets, Jared's heart pounded in his chest. The military had made their move. If they were willing to kill him, it meant they were ready to go even further. 2 days later, the Galactic Armed Forces declared a state of emergency. General Vorta made the announcement in front of a packed council chamber, his stern expression projected across every screen in the Empire. He claimed that there had been a credible threat against the Empire's security. An external force, he said, was responsible for the recent assassination attempt on the Emperor-elect. For the safety of the people, it was necessary to temporarily suspend democratic processes. Jared watched the broadcast from his hidden refuge, jaw clenched in frustration. The military had taken full control, and with the media in their pocket, they spun the narrative perfectly. The public, still reeling from the assassination attempt, had no idea they were being lied to. They believed General Vorta's story. Fear gripped the Empire, and in that fear, people were willing to give up their rights for security. Jared's supporters, however, weren't fooled. Across the Empire, protests erupted. Citizens loyal to Jared, along with rogue factions of the military and former mercenaries, rose up against the coup. What started as a series of scattered skirmishes quickly escalated into all-out civil war. The once mighty galactic empire fractured, its planets turning into battlegrounds as pro-Jared forces clashed with the loyalists led by the military and corporate-backed regimes. Cities that had once been symbols of progress and unity were now scarred by conflict, their towering spires reduced to rubble. Jared, for his part, led his forces from the shadows. He knew he couldn't return to the capital, not yet. Instead, he rallied support on the outer colonies, places the Empire had long neglected. He found allies in unexpected places and Outer Rim warlords, who had once been enemies of the state, agreed to join his cause, seeing an opportunity to gain power in the chaos. Jared didn't like making deals with men like them, but he had little choice. The war was too far gone for idealism now. As the fighting intensified, another threat loomed on the horizon. Jared knew that the Empire's internal strife had not gone unnoticed by its neighbors. For decades, the Galactic Empire had kept alien empires at bay through sheer military might and diplomatic maneuvering. But with the Empire embroiled in civil war, its defenses weakened, and borders became porous. It was only a matter of time before the predators on the fringes of known space would strike. The first incursion came from the Zereth, an alien race long seen as opportunistic scavengers. Jared's forces, still struggling to consolidate their hold on the outer colonies, were among the first to encounter them. Reports came in from several border planets of Zereth warships entering Imperial space, plundering resources, and attacking settlements. The Empire's stretched military was too focused on the internal conflict to repel the invasion, and the Zereth took advantage of the chaos. Jared realized that this external threat could either be his undoing or his salvation. If he could rally his forces to fight off the aliens, he might win back the support of the people, showing them that he was the only one capable of defending the Empire in its time of need. But it would require a delicate balance. His forces were already stretched thin, and every battle against the Zereth would give the military loyalists more time to regroup. Still, there was no choice. Jared issued the call to arms, rallying his supporters and Outer Rim allies to defend the Empire against the alien threat. The conflict with the Zereth became a brutal war of attrition, fought across vast stretches of space and barren planetary outposts. Jared personally led many of the campaigns, his charisma and determination inspiring those under his command. His reputation as a leader grew, not just as a reformist, but now as a wartime commander. But even as Jared's forces gained ground against the Zereth, the internal conflict continued to rage. General Vorta and Corwin Stratton weren't about to let a few alien skirmishes derail their plans. Behind the scenes, they struck deals with more formidable alien empires, ones that had long been kept in check by the Galactic Empire's power. These empires, more sophisticated and dangerous than the Zereth, saw the Civil War as their opportunity to carve up the Empire for themselves. One such empire was of Orn Dominion, a race of highly intelligent and ruthless conquerors. They had remained neutral in the Empire's affairs for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now, with the Empire on the brink of collapse, they seized the opportunity. Vorn fleets began appearing on the outer edges of Imperial space, not with the chaotic raids of the Zereth but with coordinated, methodical invasions. Entire planets fell under their control within days, their precision and technology far superior to what the Empire had seen in recent memory. Jared's forces, already depleted from the battles with the Zereth, were caught off guard by the Vorn assault. He quickly realized that this wasn't just a secondary threat. The Vorn intended to dismantle the Empire entirely. The Zereth had been a distraction, a nuisance that Jared could handle, but the Vorn were different. They were calculating, relentless, and far more powerful. As the war expanded on multiple fronts, Jared found himself forced into alliances he would have once considered unthinkable. Some of his closest allies urged him to sue for peace with the Vorn, to negotiate a settlement that would preserve at least part of the Empire. But Jared refused. He knew that the Vorn wouldn't stop at a mere truce. They sought total domination, and any agreement with them would only serve to further weaken the Empire. In the midst of this chaos, Jared's closest advisors began to fracture. Some believed that continuing the fight against both the Loyalists and the Vorn was a doomed effort. Others wanted to negotiate a ceasefire with the Loyalists to present a united front against the alien threat. Jared, however, saw both as enemies. He refused to compromise with the very forces that had sought to destroy him. But as the war dragged on, his idealism began to falter. The cost of the conflict was immense. Planets that had once thrived were now desolate war zones. Millions of lives were lost, and the Empire's infrastructure crumbled. The once great empire that Jared had sworn to reform was now a shadow of its former self. Desperate for a breakthrough, Jared launched a daring operation deep into Vorn-controlled space. It was a high-risk mission, designed to strike at the heart of the Vorn Dominion's command structure. If successful, it could turn the tide of the war and buy Jared the time he needed to deal with the internal threat posed by the Loyalists. The mission was brutal. Jared and his team infiltrated a heavily fortified Vorn installation, fighting their way through advanced defenses and encountering the full fury of Vorn military technology. The casualties were heavy, and Jared found himself in the thick of the fighting, his leadership once again inspiring his troops to push forward despite the overwhelming odds. In the final moments of the mission, Jared faced a choice: he had destroyed the Vorn command center, but at the cost of his entire team, or retreat and regroup, preserving his forces for another day. For Jared, the choice was clear. He ordered the attack, knowing that it was the only way to cripple the Vorn's ability to continue their offensive. The ensuing battle was vicious, but ultimately, the command center was destroyed. The Vorn, for the first time in the war, were forced into retreat. But the victory came at a steep price. Jared's forces were decimated, and while the Vorn had been dealt a significant blow, the Loyalist forces under General Vorta and Corwin Stratton were now free to tighten their grip on the remaining Imperial strongholds. With his forces in disarray, Jared returned to the outer colonies, where the news of his victory over the Vorn had rallied the people once more. But despite their support, Jared knew that the war was far from over. The Empire was fractured beyond repair, and the alien threats still loomed. The Zereth, though weakened, continued their raids, and while the Vorn had retreated, they would return. Jared gathered his remaining advisors for a final meeting. The options were bleak. The Loyalists had retaken many key planets, and the Empire's economy was in shambles. The people, once inspired by his vision of reform, were now exhausted from years of war. "There's no way out of this," one of his advisors said grimly. "We can't fight them all." Jared remained silent, staring out at the stars. The Empire had been broken long before his election, but he had still believed in the possibility of change, in the promise of a better future. Now, he was no longer sure. "We keep fighting," Jared finally said, his voice steady. "But we fight for the people, not for the Empire." "The Empire is already dead." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. The dream of reforming the Galactic Empire was over. Now, Jared was fighting to give the people a chance to survive in the chaos that had engulfed their world. As Jared prepared for what would likely be his final stand, news reached him that the Loyalists had captured one of his closest allies and were preparing for a public execution. It was a clear message. Jared's time was running out. With little choice, Jared made one final, desperate move. He sent a message to General Vorta, requesting a meeting under a flag of truce. To everyone's surprise, Vorta agreed. The meeting took place in the ruins of what had once been a grand imperial city, now reduced to rubble by the war. The two men faced each other across a barren landscape, the remains of their empire scattered around them. Jared, weary but unbroken, met Vorta's cold gaze. "It didn't have to be like this," Jared said, his voice calm. Vorta smirked. "You were always not a tilde Macron v. Jared." "The people never wanted freedom. They wanted stability. They wanted order, and you took that away." "And what have you given them in return?" Jared asked, gesturing to the ruins around them. "This?" "The Empire will rebuild," Vorta said dismissively. "It always does." Jared shook his head. "Not this time." Without warning, Jared detonated a hidden device, triggering an explosion that engulfed the meeting site. It was his final act of defiance, a message to the people that he would rather die than see the Empire continue under the corrupt rule of the elites. Jared Darlan's death sent shockwaves throughout the Empire. The Loyalists declared it a victory, but across the outer colonies, his name became a symbol of resistance. The Civil War continued, but now, it was no longer just about reforming the Empire. It was about survival in a galaxy that had turned its back on the very idea of democracy. In the end, Jared's vision of a better future died with him, But his legacy lived on. Scattered across the empire, small bands of rebels carried on the fight in his name, determined to build something new from the ashes of the old. The Galactic Empire, once a symbol of order and power, was now a fractured, war-torn remnant of its former self. The galaxy would never be the same again.